Yeah, and I think that that's actually really exciting when that happens. This is always when the illustrators send back their sketches, then I start going in and I say like, okay, we don't need this sentence anymore. Or like, ooh, if I just added these 3 words next to this picture, that would be really funny. That's my favorite phase of revising, is actually when I get to change the words around just a little bit, just to make the words and pictures come together even better. But when I'm writing, I might be thinking of like a visual mood, like the mood that I want the pictures to create, but I'm not thinking about anything specific, because it's not, I don't get to make those decisions. Illustrators do. Yeah. I let the illustrator take creative control, because I think that like my job is just to try to write a text, to write words, but that's not the whole story. The illustrator is actually making the story too. They're deciding all kinds of things: what characters look like, what the settings look like, sometimes where the page turns go, where the words are on the page. All of these things are actually, like, they really affect the experience of reading the book. They're writer decisions. I think that illustrators write with pictures and authors write with words. I like to mix it up, I think. I like to mix it up. I don't know. I know some writers. This is actually, that is such a good question, because some writers really, for kids books, some writers really prefer to make animal stories, and there's such a tradition of those. Some writers always write humans, and they like have these strong preferences. I don't have any sort of like preference if I'm just sitting here. When I write a story, I just kind of know, like, oh, this one is humans, this one is animals. And I have no idea why I make that decision, but like, it is this decision that comes like from deep down, and it just feels like it matches with the story. One time I wrote a story and I was like, this one has to have human characters. And then the illustrator made animals. So that was, again, I don't get to, which proves that I don't get to decide what the illustrator does. I think that my favorite characters. So I wrote a book that came out last year that's just about like a little dachshund named Paolo, and he's a little dog, and he doesn't really know that he's small, and he thinks he's a big hero, and so he goes off to have big adventures, and he does. He has big adventures. He never really learns that he's small. And he's so heroic. He does have a good heart. And I don't know, I really like, I get filled with love for him. I don't always, in fact, I think I usually don't write books about heroes. I think that some of the characters in my books are like really good people to hang out with, like Annabelle in Extra Yarn, Jane and Leo in a book called Leo. They're really nice. Paolo would be fun to hang out with. But I also really like to write stories about characters who make mistakes and who do bad things and make bad choices, because I think that makes for interesting stories, even if it wouldn't be like the best person to hang out with. But Paolo, I think I wouldn't mind hanging out with Paolo. You know what? Last night, I was listening to some music that was all inspired by UFOs and aliens, and I was like, I want to write about aliens. I want to write about aliens coming to Earth. I've just been writing a little bit of science fiction stuff set in space, but at last night I was getting so excited. I really wanted to write about aliens coming to Earth. So yeah. I love 2001, which is a good weird one, but I love like the different moods, because like I feel like when I watched 2001, I watched like 3 movies. I like a story that surprises me. I think stories can work in so many different ways. There's no like one way to tell a story. Like we get, obsessed with beginnings, middles, and ends, or character arcs, or any of these things. Stories can work that way. They don't have to work that way. For me, I want to be surprised. I want to be exposed to a new point of view. I want a story that even just like some character that I feel like, wow, I've never met somebody like that before, or I've never thought those thoughts before, or I want to be knocked off balance a little bit, and have to rethink how I think a story works or how the world works. That's what I think a good story can do. It can sort of surprise us, make us think something we've never thought before, make us feel something we haven't felt before. Those are the stories that I like. Yeah. The most important skill to have as a writer is actually to read. And that's the most important thing that writers do. And I don't write every single day, like we talked about, but I do read every day. And luckily, like, I've just always loved reading. It's always been my favorite thing to do. But also, now that I'm a writer, it is part of my job, because the more books you read, the better you get at writing. And it's great. Like, books that I like to read, like I said, all different genres. I like to read new authors that I've never read before, who have some new approach. I like to read books that I love. I like to read books that I can't stand. I get more ideas from the books that I don't like than the books that I do like. So I think that skill of just like reading and learning while you read, learning how a story gets told, paying attention to how other authors tell stories, that is huge for me. So reading is the most important skill. I think noticing is the next most important skill, paying attention to the world outside and the world inside. And then the third one is, and it is important, stuff of like style, writing good sentences, but all this stuff of like how to write a sentence. What we're really talking about is just like how to talk to somebody in a way that's interesting to them, not just interesting to you, right? And that's what writing really is. And even things like spelling and grammar, what we're talking about is just how we communicate. What does it feel like, not just when we say these things, but what does it feel like for the reader to read these things, to imagine, okay, what would it be like to read this piece of writing, or even to read your story out loud and see when somebody is listening, is laughing, is bored, and letting that affect the way that you write. So I think always realizing that like you're talking to someone. Every piece of writing is a conversation, and to really care what the person who's reading your story thinks of it. They're important. It's a mess. It's a mess. My writing process is just a big mess. Oh. I try to set aside time sometimes you talk to a writer and they'll say like, I write first thing in the morning. I wake up 5 minutes before the sun rises, and I go to my office and I light a candle and I have my herbal tea, and I sit and whatever comes, it flows through me. And whatever comes, I just put out on the page, and I don't care whether it's good or bad. I just let it flow, and that's my practice. I do it every day. I do it on Saturdays and Sundays. I do it on national holidays. I don't do any of that stuff. I hear people talking like that, and I'm like, that sounds so nice, and you sound so good at your job, and why is my life such chaos? I just go to my office and I watch YouTube for 6 hours, and then I panic and I write for 5 minutes, and then I'm in a bad mood the whole rest of the day because I only wrote one sentence. And that's, just put that on repeat for like most of the, like, that's 95% of it, and then 5% of it is like, oh, I think I have a good idea, and then I write and I'm excited and I say like, this day went really well, and then the next day it's just back to YouTube and staring at a computer screen. It's a mess. It's not. I'm a terrible role model. Don't do that. Don't do what I do, kids. This doesn't work for me. I think that, like, honestly, what it's all about is just finding what works for you. And if that works for them, great. That's great. But like, it doesn't work for me. It's not what my life looks like, and it's not what my writing looks like. And I think that, like, you find what works, what gets the stuff out. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but still, like, I think writers always have this thing where you're like, well, how do you do it? And is it better? Am I doing something wrong? Does somebody know something I don't? You're always feeling a little insecure that way, you know? Hey, I was telling you about that detective series I write, the Brixton Brothers. Those were the first novels that I ever wrote. And so the second one of those, I think, was the hardest to write. And I think that happens a lot, actually. Like, the second time you do something is actually the hardest time. Like, the first time, you don't even know what you're getting into, so you just sort of throw yourself into it and you finish. Wow, I did it. Okay, I know how to do it. And when you down and do it again, it's really hard. So that happened to me on my second novel for kids. Oh, it was awful. When I think back on it, and it's like, I probably wrote that book 13 or 14 years ago. It's still so vivid for me. I just can picture myself just at like my kitchen table at 3 in the morning, yeah, just like listening to the same songs over and over and over again, just trying to stay awake, finishing this thing. I think you always put a little bit of yourself in your stories, even the stories that are just so wild and so made up. Like, there's a lot in especially my longer books that is just from my life and things that I remember as a kid. So I write a series of detective stories, and like all of the home scenes in those, they're called the Brixton Brothers. The stuff that happens, like when Steve Brixton is just hanging out at home with his mom and his mom's boyfriend, that stuff is like all based on my life. And yeah, even in your picture books, I think that, like, even in weird, sort of fantastic, surreal picture books, the stuff in there has little bits and pieces of my life, for sure. And people you know, people you meet, I think that, like, they're just based on, I think authors are just so good at paying attention to things. They're just great noticers. I mean, you have to notice things all around you and notice things inside you too. Yeah.